A pleasant day to everyone. I am Christine Rubio and I am here to discuss the history of linguistics. So before the 19th century, language in the Western world was of interest mainly to philosophers. It is significant that the Greek philosophers Plato and Aristotle made major contributions to the history of language. Plato, for example, is said to have been the first person to distinguish between noun and verb. 1786 in this year, which many people regard as the birth date of linguistics. On the 27th of September 1786, an Englishman, Sir William Jones, read a paper to the Royal Asia and Asiatic Society in Calcutta, pointing out that Sanskrit, the Old Indian language, Greek, Latin, Celtic, and Germanic all had scripting structural similarities. So impressive were some likeness that this language must spring from one common source, he concluded, although Jones has the credit of making. This discovery it was an idea that was occurring independently to several scholars. At the same time, Sir William Jones' discovery fired the imagination of scholars for the next 100 years. All over linguistic work was eclipsed by the general preoccupation with writing comparative grammars. Grammars which first compared to different linguistic forms found in every members of the Indo-European language family, and second attempt to set up a hypothetical ancestor, Proto-Indo-European, from which all these languages were descendants. The 19th century concerned with reconstructing Proto-Indo-European and making hypotheses about the way it split into the various modern languages was encouraged by the general intellectual climate of the times. In the mid-19th century, Charles Darwin published his famous Origin of Speech, putting forward the theory of evolution. It seems natural to attempt the evolution of language alongside the evolution of species. This year is 200 years of Darwin's theory. This emphasis of language change eventually led to a major theoretical advance. In the last quarter of the century, a group of scholars nicknamed the Young Grammarians claimed that the language change is regular. For example, in Old English, the word chin was pronounced as kin and spelled as cin. This change from a sound to affected all other sounds which occurred at the beginning of a word, before e or I. So we also get chicken, child, chip, chill, cheese, etc. All of this which originally had the sound at the beginning, meaning that the pronunciation before was kicken, called, kip, kill, kiss, etc. Although these calm were modified to some extent, it was an important step forward for linguistics to realize that language change were not just optional tendencies, but definite and clearly state about laws. In the 20th century, the emphasis shifted from language change to language descriptions. Instead of looking how the selections of items change in the number of different languages, linguistics began to concentrate on describing single language at one describing single languages. To particular point in time, if any one person can held responsible for this change of emphasis. It was the fifth scholar Ferdinand de Saussure who is sometimes labeled the father of modern linguistics. Amazingly, he died without having written any major work on general linguistics, but his student collected together his lecture notes after his death and published them under the title Course in General Linguistics. His contribution was explicit and reiterated statement that all language items are essentially interlinked. This was aspect of language which have not been stressed before. Nobody had seriously aimed the relationship of each element to all the others. And he was the first to suggest that language was like a game of chess, a system in which each team is defined by relationship to all others. This instance says that language is a carefully built structure of interwoven elements initiated the era of structural linguistics in America. Leonard Bloomfield finished a comprehensive work entitled Language, in which he attempted to lay down rigorous procedures for the descriptions of any language. He considered that linguistics should deal objectively and systematically with observable data. So he was more interested in the way items were arranged, the syntax of the language, than in meaning semantics. The Baum videos laid down a valuable background of linguistics methodology for future generations. In the 1957, linguistics took a new thing. Noam Chomsky, at that age of 29, he was a teacher at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he at that age published a book called Syntactic Structures. And that changed the path of linguistics again. According to Chomsky, Bloom only analyzed sentence from the past old sentence. A grammar he claimed should be more than just descriptions of old utterances. In Chomsky's opinion, a linguist's task is to discover and internalize rules of grammar of each person, and that they are analyzing a grammar which consists of a statement or rules, which specify on which sequence of language are possible, in which impossible is named or called a generative language. Chomsky therefore also redirected attention toward language universals. He points out that all as humans rather similar, that internalized language mechanisms are likely to have important common properties. For example, all language have ways to say yes or no. All language have ways to name man or woman. All language are equally complex. There are no primitive languages. And that will be all for my presentation. I hope you've learned something from it, and I hope that I delivered my presentation clearly. Thank you for listening, and God bless.